Hello, my name is Delma Fonseca, and today we'll be speaking about the central and peripheral nervous system. The nervous system is the body's control center and communication network. It shares in the maintenance of homeostasis with the endocrine system. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral system consists of the afferent peripheral system, which include the sensory neurons, and the efferent peripheral system, which include the motor neurons. The afferent peripheral system can be subdivided into the somatic nervous system, sending signals to skeletal muscles, and the autonomic nervous system, which sends signals to the cardiac and smooth muscles and glands. The autonomic nervous system has two divisions: the sympathetic division, which simulates and speeds up activity, and the parasympathetic division, which restores or slows down certain activities but stimulates body's vegetative activities. The brain is one of the largest organs of the body, weighing about 3 pounds, and it is divided into 4 major parts: the brainstem, which includes the medulla oblongata, the pons varolii, the midbrain, the diencephalon, which includes the thalamus and the hypothalamus, the cerebrum, and the cerebellum. The brain cells consist of the medulla oblongata, the pons varolii, and the midbrain. It connects the brain to the spinal cord. It is a very delicate area of the brain because damage to even a small area of it could cause death. The medulla oblongata contains all the ascending and descending tracts that connect between the spinal cord and various parts of the brain. These tracts can make up the white matter of the medulla. Some motor tracts cross as they pass through the medulla, and these tracts are called the decussation of pyramids, and explains why motor areas on one side of the cortex of the cerebrum control skeletal movement on the opposite side of the body. The medulla also contains an area of dispersed gray matter. This area is called the reticular formation, which functions in maintaining consciousness and arousal. Within the medulla are 3 vital reflex centers of this reticular system: the vasomotor center, which regulates the diameter of blood vessels, the cardiac center, which regulates the force of contraction and heartbeat, and the medullary rhythmicity area, which adjusts your basic rhythm of breathing. The pons varolii is a bridge. Pons is Latin for bridge. It connects the spinal cord with the brain and parts of the brain with each other. Its pneumotaxic and apneustic area help control breathing. The midbrain is also called the mesencephalon, and it contains the ventral cerebral peduncles that convey impulses from the cerebral cortex to the pons and spinal cord. It also contains the dorsal tectum, which is a reflex center that controls the movement of eyeballs and head in response to visual stimuli, and it controls the movement of the head and trunk in response to auditory stimuli. So when you hear loud noises and you flinch, it's usually because of the dorsal tectum. The diencephalon is superior to the midbrain and between 2 cerebral hemispheres. It is divided into 2 main areas: the thalamus and the hypothalamus. So we see here the thalamus. The hypothalamus is much smaller over here. It also contains the optic tracts and optic chiasma, where optic nerves cross each other, the infundibulum, which attaches to the pituitary gland, as we see here, the mammillary bodies, which are involved in memory and emotional responses to odor, and the pineal gland, which is right here, which is part of the epithalamus. The pineal gland is the pine cone-shaped endocrine gland that secretes melatonin, which affects our moods and behavior. The thalamus is the superior part of the diencephalon, and the principal relay station for sensory impulses that reach the cerebral cortex coming from the spinal cord, brainstem, and parts of the cerebrum. It also plays an important role as an interpretation center for conscious recognition of pain and temperature and some crude pressure and touch. The epithalamus is a small area superior and posterior to the thalamus. It contains the pineal gland, as mentioned before. The hypothalamus is the inferior part of the diencephalon, and despite its small size, controls many bodily functions related to homeostasis. Controls and integrates the autonomic nervous system, receives sensory impulses from internal organs, the intermediary between the nervous and endocrine systems, and because it sends signals and controls the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus is where our feelings of rage and aggression are controlled, where normal body temperature is controlled. It contains our thirst center, and it maintains our walking state and sleep patterns. The cerebrum makes up the bulk of the brain. The surface is composed of gray matter and is referred to as the cerebral cortex. So this right here is what we refer to as the cerebral cortex, which is basically what we see in dissections, or when we picture the brain, this is what we think of, the biggest portion of it. Beneath the cortex lies the cerebral white matter. The longitudinal fissure separates the cerebrum into right and left halves. So right here, this is the longitudinal fissure, and it separates it into left and right. And these are called cerebral hemispheres. Gyri and sulci are folds that increase the surface area of the cortex, which has motor areas for controlling muscular movements, sensory areas for interpreting sensory impulses, and association areas concerned with emotional and intellectual processes. So gyri are basically all that we see here, all these folds that we see within the brain, and the sulci is basically what's in between the cracks, the little grooves within the brain. A deep bridge of nerve fiber known as the corpus callosum connects the two cerebral hemispheres. The corpus callosum, there's not really a good way to show it right now, but it is around here, and it is what connects left and right hemispheres of the brain. The lobes of the cerebral hemispheres are named after the bones in the skull that lie on top of them. The frontal lobe, so here, forms the anterior portion of each hemisphere, and it controls voluntary muscular functions, moods, aggression, smell reception, and motivation. The parietal lobe is behind the frontal lobe, so here, and is separated from it by its central sulcus. It is the control center for evaluating sensory information of touch, pain, balance, taste, and temperature. The temporal lobe is beneath the frontal and parietal lobes and is separated from them by a lateral fissure. It evaluates hearing input and smell, as well as being involved with memory processes. The occipital lobe forms the back portion of each hemisphere. So back here. Its boundaries are not distinct from the other lobes. Its functions in receiving and interpreting visual input. The cerebellum is the second largest portion of the brain. It is shaped somewhat like a butterfly, and it is located beneath the occipital lobes of the cerebrum and behind the pons and medulla oblongata of the brainstem. It consists of two partially separated hemispheres connected by a centrally constricted structure called the vermis. It is made up primarily of white matter with a thin layer of gray matter on its surface, called the cerebral cortex. It functions as a reflex center in coordinating complex skeletal muscular movements, maintaining proper body posture, and keeping the body balanced. If damaged, there can be a decrease in muscle tone, tremors, a loss of equilibrium, and difficulty in skeletal muscle movements. The next portion of the central nervous system that we will be covering today will be the spinal cord. Sorry about that. The spinal cord extends from the base of the skull to a point about 2/3 of the way down the back, running through the vertebral canal. The cord itself has a central region of gray matter, which is divided into posterior and anterior ventral horns, and has an intermediate zone. The gray matter is surrounded by white matter carrying the ascending and descending fiber tracts. The dorsal horns are specialized to process sensory information such as touch, pain, and joint sensation, and to relay this information up to the brain. The ventral horns contain motor neurons, which transmit messages out to the muscles via spinal nerves. The intermediate zone contains many interneurons that are involved in linking incoming sensory neurons with outgoing motor neurons to bring automated, which are reflex responses that do not involve the brain. The spinal cord has many nerve fibers attached to it, arranged in sets and named according to their level on the cord. The spinal cord acts as an intermediary between the peripheral nervous system and the brain. There are 8 cervical spinal nerves, 12 thoracic spinal nerves, 5 lumbar spinal nerves, 5 sacral spinal nerves, and 1 coccygeal spinal nerve. Each nerve supplies a circumscribed area of skin, a dermatome, and a specific group of muscles. The second portion of today's presentation includes the peripheral nervous system. The cells of the peripheral nervous system include the neuroglial cells, which function to help neurons, are more numerous than neurons in the nervous system, and do not conduct nerve impulses or generate APS. There are different types of neuroglia. There's the astrocytes, they function in the blood and brain barrier to prevent toxic substances from entering the brain. We have the oligodendroglia, which provides support and connection. The microglia, which is involved in the phagocytosis of unwanted substances. The endomal cells, from the lining of the cavities in the brain and spinal cord. And the Schwann cells, which are located only in the peripheral nervous system and make up the neurolemma and the myelin sheath. We also have neurons, which are the functional unit of the nervous system. They're the longest living cells in the body, and they can live for over 100 years. They do not undergo mitosis to replace dead neurons, unlike skin cells. Functional components include reception, conducting, and secretory, and they're very high in metabolic rate and absolutely require glucose and oxygen. The afferent peripheral system includes the sensory functions. The afferent nerves involve receptors that move towards the central nervous system. So the somatic area inputs skin, external environment, skeletal muscles, and joints, and internal environment. And that's the internal environment portion of it. The visceral area inputs from the ventral body cavity, and this includes the special senses, which are sight, hearing, taste, and smell. So basically, these are the nerves that take in external stimuli and send these signals to the brain through the neurons, spinal cord, and the brain, as we mentioned before. The afferent peripheral system includes the motor functions. So these are the nerves and receptors that move away from the central nervous system. The somatic, which is voluntary, respond to internal changes and regulate internal body environment. So basically, if we have a fever and your body is looking away to regulate body temperature, it would send the signal to your skin to start sweating. Well, not to your skin, but to your glands. This further divides into the sympathetic area, which is active during the fight or flight responses, and the parasympathetic, which is predominant except in above situations, and it basically works in the rest and restorative functions. The autonomous nervous system is a subdivision of the afferent peripheral nervous system, and it is divided into 2 portions. The sympathetic division, which prepares the body for stressful situations that require expenditure, such as increasing heartbeat, breathing rate stiffly from a threatening situation, and the parasympathetic division, which operates under normal, non-stressful conditions, also function in restoring the body to a restful state after a stressful experience. And that is all for today. Thank you.